So, kia ora and welcome to the first ever Officials Hub Live. I'm Sam Adam, for those who don't know me, and to my right is Brandon Hale. We are the co-founders of the Officials Hub.
The Officials Hub is a platform for referees or umpires of all sports to come together and share ideas.
Tonight, we start the journey, the wide journey, by interviewing a man to the bottom right of your screen called Jono Bredin.
Hey guys.
For those who don't know Jono's story, he was born in Gore in high school there. He took up netball umpiring, and in 2009 he was appointed to the umpiring panel of International Netball Federation.
He continued his grow to be one of the top netball umpires in the world, which he continues to be today, and umpired the Commonwealth Games gold medal match in 2018. He also, in 2015 and 2016, won New Zealand Netball Umpire of the Year. In the 2018, he hung up the domestic netball boots after an 18-year-long career.
In 2015, he started refereeing rugby. Under the careful tutelage of Ben O'Keefe and Jim Thompson, he grew to a premier debut in Dunedin later that year.
In November 2016, New Zealand Rugby appointed him to the wider training squad, and after 2 years of officiating Premier Club Rugby and the Jock Hobbs Under-19 tournament,
Jono then made his first class debut when he refereed South Canterbury versus North Otago. After a year of doing Heartland and Farah Palmer Cup rugby, he welcomed 2020 with a bang. A Super Rugby debut as an assistant referee and a call-up to the Mitre 10 Cup referee squad.
Jono this Sunday makes his Mitre 10 rugby debut. He referees Southland versus Waikato in Invercargill, which is a huge moment in his career. Congratulations, mate, and what a wonderful career.
Thanks, guys. Quite the intro. It's I don't know if it makes me feel humbled or old or both, but thanks very much. Good to be here.
No worries. We'll start it off with all your success in netball, getting to the top of the game, which could be classed as the Commonwealth Games gold medal match. What inspired you to change to rugby?
Yeah, I think this is a question that I get asked quite often. One of the things that I have always done throughout my netball career is looked for role models and other officials from outside netball to just pick their brains, share ideas, because a lot of skills that we have as officials kind of span whatever codes we're officiating. So I've always been quite good mates with Ben O'Keefe, obviously, who's one of the world's leading rugby referees for a number of years. And it was kind of getting to the point where, I had achieved a lot in my netball career, and I'm the type of guy who's quite driven by thinking outside the square and going after that next challenge. So Ben and I had always joked about potentially giving rugby a crack. And he just said to me one year, he's like, why don't you do it? Like, look, you can keep doing the netball at the same time and just pull the boots on a Saturday, see if you like it, see if you get a feel for it. Obviously, as any Kiwi, I watched the game and I obviously followed the referee with interest, because kind of that's a dorky thing you do when you're an official of sport, right? You watch the referee rather than the game. So, yeah, just basically went from there. I got in touch with, at the time, Vinnie Munro, who was in charge of talent development at New Zealand Rugby, and said, who do I talk to? What do I do? And look, I can't speak highly enough of rugby giving me an opportunity and pointing me in the right direction. And, that leads me even to this day to the opportunity I've got this weekend. So, yeah, it's been a pretty cool journey.
That's awesome. That's awesome. On that note of obviously transferring from netball to rugby, what do you believe was your greatest challenge when starting out rugby refereeing, and how did you grow from it?
Yes, I think probably the biggest challenge, obviously, is learning the law in terms of the technical aspects. I mean, I've done that before in netball, so actually learning law wasn't an issue. But probably the feel and how you apply that law in a rugby sense was a little bit harder to get my head around from the background in netball, where you see something, you penalise it, where in rugby I quickly learned it's more about observing, looking at the context around something, deciding and then acting on it. And a lot of the times it's about what decisions you don't make that actually make the game more of a spectacle. And as the punters on the sideline who harassed me every single week about go back to netball and all the rest of it. It'd be fair to say I blew my,
the old contact wing defence.
Yeah, exactly right. Still to this day, that actual feel element was something that I, while you had it in netball, it wasn't as prevalent and probably as important. And then obviously just the physicality in terms of being able to cover ground. I'm used to running 15-meter goes on a nice sprung wooden floor without, 15 guys running straight at me. I'm in netball, I'm safely outside the court. If you get hit, you've probably deserved it. Whereas in rugby, despite best intentions, you get in the way.
And the players still think you deserve it.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, just being in the right place at the right time, so important to any official in sport. But for me, with no knowledge of rugby really whatsoever, that was the biggest learning curve for me.
Yeah, and moving on for that, obviously you met Danielle through netball, your partner, and you've got a young family at home, so it must be hard to keep that work-life rugby balance. So how do you cope with it, and how do you run a week-to-week basis, especially with a 6-week-old at home?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying I wouldn't be able to do rugby at all without Danielle and how amazing she is at home and with the kids. We've invested in a nanny this time around with 3 kids under 3.5. It was just getting a little bit too crazy for me to just gallivant off every weekend. And I think you're right. I think if you talk to any official of any sport, no matter what it is, it all comes down to the support network you've got around you. And I'm certainly very lucky and very grateful to Danielle for that. And equally, hopefully, I'll be able to return the favour when she goes back to netball next year. So it's not easy. I won't lie. Danielle will know you that I live a crazy busy lifestyle. I own my own business. I am a rugby referee. I still do some netball stuff around the edges. Yeah, I don't like sitting still, you could say. But having said that, COVID has taught me and lockdown has taught me that there's sometimes no better place than being at home and being with your family and taking time out away from everything to spend time with what really matters in life. So I'm trying to keep working on that. And the cool thing about rugby is that, everyone that's involved in the sport recognises that, your holistic wellness is just as important as what you're putting out on the paddock. So, there's no pressure for us to put rugby ahead of family. In fact, the two go hand in hand and is courage. So a happy home life makes a better official on the field on the weekend.
Yeah, and I think they got clarified earlier this year when you had that tackle the struggle round, especially around the university down here in Dunedin, and those two clubs coming together to tackle the struggle of mental health. Yeah,
and if you look at last week being Mental Health Week, I mean, the Head First sponsors is one of the sponsors for the referees in Mitre 10 Cup and Whare Cup. That's New Zealand Rugby's initiative around this space. I think it's really important now, so more than ever, with the way the world is and some pretty challenging times, that we look after ourselves and our loved ones. And life's too short, and sport is just an important part of that, really.
Mm-hmm. It's very powerful words there, Bredin. Like you touched on how important the partners are, and to be fair, I don't think the partners of us as officials get enough kudos as they deserve. Like there's obviously a lot that goes in behind the scenes. Meanwhile, your rock is walking in behind you as we speak, still running the house while you're on a chat with a couple of refs.
You're thinking another bloody rugby commitment.
Exactly.
You're right. I mean, and the thing is that they stick by us through thick and thin. I mean, most people out there won't know when our partners come and actually watch us on the weekend and they rock up to support us, and then they hear all the abuse that gets hurled in our direction, or you have a bad day at the office, and I've seen it all through netball as well. As you can't have a game without officials, but a lot of the public forget that from time to time, sadly.
Yeah, 100%. Moving on, what's your most memorable performance on the netball court and then on the rugby field to date? And we say to date because we know what's obviously happening this weekend, but you want to go ahead with that?
Yeah, so certainly netball, that's an easy answer. I mean, being appointed to umpire the gold medal match at the Commonwealth Games in the Gold Coast a couple of years ago was just really a cherry on top for a couple of reasons. One was it was an immense fixture. The game was won by 1 goal by England, which in itself was a huge upset compared to the previous Commonwealth Games where only New Zealand or Australia had won a gold medal. The winning goal was shot off one of my decisions, which, you know, you talk about what you train for as an official, like making a split-second decision under pressure. You couldn't get any more pressure than that, and for it to be accurate and you decide the outcome of the match, you know, is quite rewarding for an official. And yes, and lastly, like just to have the opportunity to go out on the court on that fixture, you know, umpiring in netball is like a lot of sports. It's neutral from a home country perspective. So, you know, the fact that New Zealand wasn't in the final, which was pretty gutting for them, but, you know, it was a huge opportunity for me that you never know may come about. So yeah, that was pretty cool. From a rugby perspective, I think, you know, a number of things that spring to mind, but probably the opportunity this year to run touch for Super Rugby Aotearoa was pretty cool, and something that 80 minutes just flew by. But just to be part of the wider, you know, professional referee set up for a week was an insight into the future and something that, you know, really pushed my buttons and made me really determined to do a good job. And obviously, from my own refereeing perspective, you know, my first class games, each and every one at the moment is, you know, something I learned from. Probably the New Zealand and Australia secondary schools test match last year was probably a pinnacle match that I refereed to date. But I'm just soaking up every game, anytime I get an opportunity, just learning and growing as a referee.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And we talk about growth and we say, so what's next for Jono Bredin? Trying to crack Super Rugby? Is it trying to crack international rugby? Or is it even going back to netball in 2022 Commonwealth Games coming up?
One thing that the world's taught us at the moment is that, you know, you never take anything for granted and you don't know what's coming next. At the moment, I'm fully focused on rugby in terms of where I can get myself to there. And obviously this weekend is an opportunity for me to put my best foot forward. I'll be doing my best on Sunday. And for me, it's never been about outcomes. If you get the process right and you've got the right high performance mindset, any opportunities that come, you will have done the hard work and deserve to be there. And it's quite satisfying from a mental perspective that you know you're in that spot. If you get that opportunity, you're not kind of worrying what might come next. So, yeah, in terms of future aspirations, obviously I've already said I'm ambitious. I'm not here to make up numbers, but equally I'm just continuing to do what I do, and hopefully I keep getting better. And as I get more and more experience with rugby, if that leads somewhere, then obviously I'd be thrilled. But I have to do the hard work, and I've got, you know, I'm under no illusions there. So
yeah, I think that's a really key.
That's where I'm at.
I think that's a really key message around it's all about the process rather than the outcomes, because as we know in sport, in terms of refereeing appointments or umpiring appointments, it's not necessarily, you can't control the controllables. So it's all about getting your process right and controlling what you can, which I think is vital in terms of progressing into that high performance mindset.
I think also something for developing young referees as well. It's probably something to get into your head sooner rather than later. That as well is that, you know, it is someone's perspective of whether you get selected for said tournament or set game as well. And you've got a lot of takeaways from every game, like you said as well, with your debuts. So that's awesome.
Well, I know from my own experience with a netball where I've been involved. Not just as an umpire, but, you know, assessing and mentoring other umpires, a couple of roles I still do. You know, you often put umpires on a game for a variety of reasons, and it's not always based on them being the best or the second best. you might put them there to challenge them in a certain way based on how those teams are going to play, or you wanted to see them under a little bit less pressure and getting back to the basics. So you definitely never focus on the actual fixture you get appointed to, no matter what the sport, because I know that people get opportunities for a variety of reasons, and at the end of the day, it's about getting everyone better.
100%. Question 10. How have you dealt with communication when it comes to players that don't speak English that well?
Yeah, this is a good question. So obviously in netball, there's quite a number of African and Caribbean countries where they do speak English, but they're not necessarily accustomed to a Kiwi accent, and Kiwis notoriously speak very, very fast. And obviously, and if anyone's ever watched a game of netball, you take that 10 times faster when you're trying to spit it all out between infringements. So I think that the language itself isn't so much the issue, because if you get a game in a large arena indoors, you can't hear a lot of what's being said anyway. So, communication to me is more than words. It's about body language, eye contact, hand signals. All those are things that, are probably more used. If you asked any player, that would be more useful to knowing what the hell's going on than actually listening to what you have to say. How you blow your whistle, what the tone is, whether you, hold it a bit longer, or, I know this is getting really nerdy now, but I'm pitching to the audience. I think the spoken word is only one part of it. That's certainly from a netball sense, because one thing I've found with rugby, obviously, is you do get the opportunity when play stops a lot more to actually take the time to explain yourself and bring the players on a journey with you, which is a really cool something I'm enjoying from the change to rugby, because you didn't necessarily get that in netball, which sometimes led to players getting frustrated because they just didn't have the time to understand what you're actually ruling.
Yeah, that's really, really cool insight there. And then the next question, we kind of go on from that and say, so what are the transferable skills you believe there are when it comes to officiating from netball to rugby to officiating in general?
Yeah, I think all the stuff that is around the top 2 inches, they say. So, performing under pressure, getting yourself in the right headspace, dealing with making a bad decision or adversity, those skills transfer, I believe, from whatever sport to whatever sport. Certainly, I think the communication and game management piece, while the rules that attach to each of those components might be different between sport to sport, the underlying skills in terms of empathy, understanding, articulating decisions, reading the, where the game's at in terms of pressure, or having a heightened awareness around when one team's under the pump or the score's getting tight or time's running out. All those skills, I think, again, are transferable. A lot more so than people think. And I think that probably hit home to me when, I got chucked in the deep end. I think on my 3rd game of rugby, I refereed a Premier Rugby game. And it was like, in terms of, like, I was shit scared inside that I didn't have any clue what was going on. But in terms of, no one would have read that from how I was carrying myself around the field, because I had the experience and the confidence knowing that I could, I was going to put my best foot forward, and at the end of the day, it's a game of rugby. So I think that mindset piece is really powerful. And I've spoken to, other rugby referees at a high level. I've worked with some cricket umpires who are on the ICC panel. It's all the same. I mean, when you talk to a cricket umpire, for example, you stand there in the same spot for 7 hours, and then the last ball of the day, you've got to hear the thinnest of edges. Like, that's just the ability to switch on and switch off and do your job. And it's just being unconsciously competent at all those skill sets. So when the time comes, it's just bang, the decision's made, and it's right.
Really, really key takeaways there. I really like that. actually reminds me of one of the first things that was told to me as an 18-year-old when I started up refereeing rugby, which I had no idea what I was doing, was even if you don't know what you're doing, make it look like you know what you're doing, because everyone will probably believe you. So I became a pretty good salesperson in my first couple of years of refereeing.
Yeah, it's the old adage that you look like a referee, you sound like a referee, you are a referee.
And you know what? There's nothing truer. Like if you blow, and even at the highest level, if you blow your whistle crisply, you're dressed the part, you're confident, and you're articulate, that gets you out of some pretty hairy situations, because you just carry that mana with you, and people have trust and confidence that you're putting your best foot forward.
Yeah, we'll just take a wee break there and just address our Facebook public. If you do have any questions for Jono, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and we'll get to those in about 5 to 10 minutes or so.
Nice. Next question. You've been at the centre of a woman-dominated sport for most of your life. How do you feel about the rapid growth of women's rugby in New Zealand and around the world currently?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for everyone to be able to participate in sport, no matter age and stage, gender, orientation, whatever. Like, sport gives so much to people around the world. I think it's really important that every sport provides an avenue for that to happen. So from the aspect of women's rugby, I mean, you only have to look at the popularity of the sport that's taken off over recent years, to the point now where we've got, I think at least 10, domestic teams in the Farah Palmer Cup competition. We've got a pretty awesome Blackfern Sevens program, and a lot of people from other sports are now looking to rugby and saying, wow, isn't this cool? There's a pathway. Obviously, the Olympics, from a rugby perspective, is a huge carrot for people to be involved. But I just think it shows that the way the world's moving, it's not just about the guys, it's about the girls as well. I've refereed Farah Palmer Cup for the last 3 weeks. Like, those girls have got some pretty amazing skills. Sure, it's different to what a male's game may look or feel like, but it doesn't make it any less entertaining for the public at home on TV, or for young girls at high school looking for what they're going to do to keep fit and make some mates.
For sure.
Yeah, and we look at it now, and there is a true pathway through to the top of the women's game, which is pretty cool. Moving on, we talk about challenges, and not only on the court in terms of making decision making, but we talk about off the court. We talk about the media, especially, and the pressures that come with international netball and
I know where this is going.
Provincial rugby. I think myself this year experienced a bit of that through the media. And how do you deal with media and the sort of interactions around the pressures that come with the media and the stigmas that come around officiating in the media?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, I think the media is a stakeholder in our sport. So I think first and foremost, it's really important to be respectful and appreciate that they've got a job to do. And equally, the media have got a role to play in making officiating attractive and something that people want to do, because let's be honest, we can't have any sport without the officials. Obviously, you don't sign up as a referee or an umpire to be getting rave reviews in the paper on Monday and your photo saying how amazing the umpiring or refereeing was. I mean, just ask Colin Hawke. I mean, 25 years ago, and he's still getting articles published about that game. And that I can use that example because he's actually my coach. He won't mind me sharing. Look, you've got to have a thick skin. I mean, unfortunately, with the world we live in now, with social media and the rest of it, I'd be lying to say at the highest level in either netball or rugby that, you don't have some pretty untoward people reaching out to you from time to time to give you their 10 cents, and that's probably being polite. But look, you just have to be able to ignore it. I mean, if you start reading social media, you'll work yourself up. And it won't do any good for your home life, and it certainly won't do any good for your refereeing. So I think we're naive to think that we're never going to get that. I think it's part and parcel of the job. It's up to us about how we harness that and use the best of our abilities.
Yeah. Some really key words there. And a lot of takeaways from that. We've all had our fair share of social media and the media in the past few years, so no one's avoided that. Moving on a bit and still staying on that same sort of theme of mental health as well, is mental health is a massive importance in society these days. How do you deal with the pressure of international netball or provincial rugby?
Yeah, so I think what you can't underestimate is that if you want to get fit, you train, or you go to the gym, or you get a personal trainer. So if you want to be mentally strong and mentally tough, you need to get a team. You need to surround yourself with the right people. You need to train your mental skills. You need to be able to you need to be able to know when you need help. When I say you need help, that doesn't necessarily mean to say anything's wrong. But at high performance, you're talking about the 1% that separates you from the next person. And if you can have mental toughness and fortitude that is superior when you have a bad day at the office to the next person, then that positions you to bounce back quicker and get back to where you need to be. So, it helps when you're good and it helps when you're not so good. If I look at myself, I've always worked with a mental skills person, or I've had mentors that I trust. Rugby's awesome. They provide resources in this space as well. So it's just that sounding board. It's somebody to challenge your way of thinking. I always feel when I have a chat with Jace, my mental skills coach, he just like gets things out of you without you even knowing that you're giving it up. And that's just huge. It's just hugely powerful because he just questions you constantly about, why you're thinking a certain way. Have you thought of this? Have you thought about that? And it just adds a completely different perspective that helps you be a better person. And, and sometimes it just puts life in perspective as well. Like at the end of the day, like I said earlier, it's about you as a person, not necessarily you as the referee or you as the employee or you as the father. You've got all these different hats to wear at any given time. And what can we do to develop you as a person to make sure that you're the best across all of those hats?
Yeah, it's pretty key these days as well to have that mental health checkup and be able to be open about mental health, because it is hugely prevalent in society now to actually be open and speak up. Moving on a completely different direction, talk about funding, because it's huge in sport. You can't have sport without funding, and looking at, and especially netball, where it doesn't have the funding for officials, and rugby where it does. And how do you deal with those challenges around funding and being able to travel overseas easily? And
yeah, so I guess just some context. I've always viewed, and the reason I I umpire netball and referee rugby has never been to do about any form of payment. I do it because I love the sport, I love the challenge, and it's something I do for me. Obviously, the fact that there's some compensation at times is a bonus, but I think, I think first and foremost, it's really important to, I've always said if you're doing it for the money, it's probably time to give up. From a netball perspective, I mean, it's always run on a smell of an oily rag. Certainly from an international perspective, it shocks people when I tell them that, I can go away for 2 weeks and umpire a test series like I did in England at the start of the year. Our flights and accommodation are covered. We get some meal money, but that's it. There's no match payments, no retainer, no salary. So, that's a pretty big commitment. And I don't think it's necessarily understood. Like, people are taking annual leave to travel around the world. They're leaving their families behind. So, but again, it comes back to, through that experience, I've got to see some pretty amazing countries around the world, got to umpire some pretty cool games. I've made some great mates. On the rugby flip side, sure, they have got some resource, but like COVID has just thrown that up on its head as well. I mean, I think what we've shown with COVID, and this is just not in sport, but across the business world, is that things are pretty fickle. And who would have thought at the start of the year we were talking about a global pandemic which killed 1 million people and shut the whole world down? So, I think the fact that we've got professional sport at all still, is pretty amazing considering what we're going through. And I mean, I don't think anyone thinks we're out of the woods yet. So I think, I'm just realistic. Like, everyone's doing the best they can with the resources they've got available to keep all facets of the game happy. And, officiating is just one part, but, collectively is where our strength lies. So we've just got to do what's best for the greater good.
Yeah, we've got a question from Facebook. How do you recover from or analyse a game that you might have gotten away from you, e.g. lots of penalties or cards, especially in rugby, or with just lots of negative play? I remember an article a couple of years ago coming out dealing with sin binning that you had a netball as well, or a 2 minutes violation. So how do you deal with analysing games in terms of that? You may think, actually, I've come off, maybe I didn't do that great a job.
I think the real strength in being a world-class official is being able to be vulnerable and being brutally honest with yourself in terms of your own performance. I talk to some referees when they've completed a game of rugby or a game of netball, and they're like, "Oh, that was great, I was awesome," and I'm thinking to myself, "Well, I was on the other side, and but I've been in that position too." And in fairness, I was probably like that earlier on in my career. I just, you kind of get a little bit ahead of yourself from time to time. But as I've matured as an official, like, the real power is taking the learnings from a game where you mightn't have done things the way you would like to, and making sure that you never do it that way again. So the next time you see that scenario, or you see, and look, we've all had games that just turn to absolute, crap. The weather might be bad, everyone might be in a bad mood, you might have had a bad day at work. But it's more about how you pick yourself up from that to make sure that you put yourself in a better place for next time. I have a saying that it's only a mistake if you make it twice. So for me, that's about taking the learnings out of one game to the next, and owning up to the fact that you may have made an error. I mean, I think that's the really cool thing, with the rugby process, is it's such a collegial bunch of, not just amongst the officials where we all share on a weekly basis to get some learnings, but also the coaches and the players. We quite often work together probably a lot more closely in rugby than we ever did in netball, trying to get the best outcome for the game. So that's a bit of give and take for us, a bit of give and take for the coaches, and a bit of give and take for the players. And if you look at what we're trying to do in Mitre 10 Cup and Farah Palmer this year around the priorities and the focus areas of the game, it's about, getting back to what's going to give us the best spectacle on the field. And I'm fully on board with that. I think that's the exact right way to approach our role in the game.
I really like that. Like we as referees probably don't realise always that we've only got a perspective on the game. There's so many other people who are watching the same game as you, but they might not be watching the same game as you because they've got a different perspective. So I think, like us as referees, are probably got to be a bit more vulnerable and open and honest to, hey, maybe I was wrong. I can understand how this person is perceiving this and working from that, rather than just chucking up walls and being, nope, I'm right. Nah, I'm sticking with it.
Yeah. And I think the flip side of that too is like refereeing is by its nature a negatively geared role from time to time. I mean, it is our job to make unpopular decisions that, God forbid, actually turn out to be correct. So, I mean, you used the example from my netball days of where I took the unprecedented step of, suspending a player, which rarely happens in netball. But, we agreed before the season how we were going to umpire a certain thing that was communicated, and all I was doing was actually following through on what we'd agreed and what the rules said. So the fact that I took it in the media, I actually would water off a duck's back, because at the end of the day, I was there to do what we said we were going to do. It's not our job to win a popularity contest. And, you know, sometimes the tough decisions need to be made, and they're not going to be popular to at least half the general public. So, you know, you make them and you go to your next game.
We'll just see if there's any more questions coming through on Facebook or on Instagram. We'll just give it a couple more minutes. But I've got a question for you, Jono. 2021 Rugby World Cup is being held in Auckland and Northland. Black Ferns, obviously, favourites in our minds, but what are teams to look out for?
Oh, God, you're asking me. I just rock up and referee. Well, I mean, it's just, I think it's just going to be a little bit of wait and see, because with there being limited international matches this year, you just don't know what people are getting up to behind closed doors. And, you know, I look at the Black Fern Stars that are, you know, staggered around Farah Palmer Cup teams, like they're playing some pretty awesome code. But equally, you know, you look at previous Women's World Cups and equally other teams have bought it. So look, first and foremost, it would be amazing if we can get this COVID nonsense sorted so we can get ahead and have the tournament confirmed as it is now. And actually, it'd be great to see it on our shores, and what an awesome spectacle for rugby in this country.
Yeah, and the growth of the women's game in particular.
100%.
Nice. Have we got any more messages that you come through?
Just have a quick look. No, we're good. You go. You escaped, Jono.
Nice.
That's right. Have you got any last final sort of words there, Jono? Any parting gifts of wisdom? Not that everything you've been saying has been wise.
No, I mean, I think it's like, this is a really cool initiative. I think one of the things that has got me where it has in both netball and rugby is the ability to share and take any opportunity to learn and discuss with others. And I think this forum that you guys have come up with is a pretty cool insight from some two ruffians in Dunedin, if I can say that. And I think, you know, let's not be afraid to, you know, share what we've been through, what are our learnings, what are some cool takeaways that other people have experienced. And like, I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes in terms of other people who are going to share with us some of their story. Because I think if there's one learning that I've had from my officiating career is, you know, people quite often judge you from how you might look on TV or at the netball courts or on the rugby field. That's not the person. That's, you know, that's a persona that we put out there on the day. And people are sometimes quite, when they talk to me, like, oh man, he actually like smiles and has got a sense of humor. And you know, some people say that. And I think that as I've got to know my peers in rugby and in netball and across other codes, like there's some pretty amazing people with some pretty amazing skills, stories, you know, whether it be at family, with their family life or their work life or their, you know, what they're doing, you know, for their culture. I mean, there's just so much. And I think that's what makes the officiating community so awesome. And I think we just really need to harness that, and the world will be a better place.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can grow even further, to be fair.
Cool. No, that's great. Hi, in conclusion, thanks to everyone for tuning in to our inaugural Q&A with Jono Bredin. Be tuned for more content in the near future. We're open to other ideas as well, whether it's other sports, different perspectives, fire away at us, and keep involved, eh?
Yeah, and a massive thank you to Jono for joining us. It's been awesome to get your insight into not only rugby, but netball. Thank you guys tuning in. Stay tuned, and hopefully more content to come either later this week or early next week. Cheers, team.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
See ya.